Let us start in Montgomery, Alabama. Craig, welcome to the Line of Fire.
Hi, Dr. Brown. How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Hi. My question is, it's regarding Philippians 3:8, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As someone who was kind of a squishy liberal in my past Christian life and is now obsessed and convicted with the pursuit of holiness, I'm also surrounded by people who choose to use profanity, and some people who are quite involved in the church.
Yeah.
And they use Philippians 3:8, Paul's use of the word, excuse me if I mispronounce this, I think it's skubalon, and how that was the Greek equivalent of the expletive for
excrement or dung. Right. So
yes.
Paul used profanity, we can use profanity.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's first look at other things that Paul did say, all right? For example, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Ephesians 4:29. Paul is giving general counsel for our speech, and he says this, Ephesians 4:29, no foul language is to come from your mouth, but only what is good for building up someone in need, so that it gives grace to those who hear. So we know in many circles that profanity is offensive. That's why things are censored on TV and radio. That's why you're not going to hear someone preaching from the pulpit using all kinds of foul language. That's why when President Trump has used certain foul language in public, it's created a lot of controversy because many are offended by it. So just my use of profanity, that would offend many people. If, God forbid, I started using profanity on the radio, that would offend and stumble many people. It would not be gracious to them. So since these people, these Christians, in the name of, quote, liberty, who want to use profanity, they know they're going to be offending people. In fact, sometimes they do it intentionally to say, hey, I'm not religious. Well, now they're violating Ephesians 4:29. That's where I start, okay? And that's very, very strong. Then Ephesians 5:4, we'll start in verse 3. But sexual immorality and any impurity or greed should not even be heard among you, as is proper for saints. Coarse and foolish talking or crude joking are not suitable, but rather giving thanks. So I would encourage anyone to go through the book of Proverbs, look at everything it says about the tongue and what speech is appropriate, inappropriate. Look at some of these words of Paul in Colossians 3 and 4. There's more about our speech and everything seasoned with salt, etc. And I would say, okay, does the use of profanity fit in there? And the answer is categorically no. Now, did Paul use profanity in Philippians 3 when he said, I've lost everything, and did he consider it dung? Did he consider it rubbish? Did he consider it excrement? Did he consider it the S word? Well, since we know how careful Paul was with his words, since we know the guidelines he gave elsewhere, since we know the quality of his life, that he would always use himself as an example of holiness and say, follow me the way I follow Jesus. Since we don't have the use of profanity, some flippant, profane speech throughout Scripture, that would lead you to say, okay, in some contexts, the word could be profane, but it could also just mean dung or excrement. So I'm not going to go from there and say I can just use profanity in my everyday speech. Plus, the use of profanity for most is not doing what Paul's trying to do, to say that everything I lost is that worthless, that base. In other words, if that was the context of it, and someone said, they're fighting depression, and they say, I just feel like, and they use the S word, well, that's not the end of the world. I mean, I think it's inappropriate, and I'd rather they didn't use that speech, but they're saying that's how badly I feel. But most are using the F word, other things, just to say I'm free. That, to me, is immaturity. That violates many, many principles of Scripture and even explicit verses. And Philippians 3:8 certainly does not give people the liberty to use all kinds of profane speech in their everyday talk.
Okay. And just a small follow-up. With the verse about crude joking, I've also heard a defense of that being in the sense of whenever Elijah was mocking the false prophets, asking if their deity was, using the toilet.
Yeah, well, that's obviously not sin. Right. So that is exposing a false god. A crude joking is normally some sexual joke or something like that, or talking about what you do in the bathroom in greater detail. to say, and there's a little bit of debate in the Hebrew in terms of exactly what Elijah was saying, but I do think that he was mocking the false god. You know, you think he's a god. Where is he? Is he resting? Is he taking a walk? Is he sitting on the toilet? I don't see that as crude joking at all. Crude joking is the kind of thing that I couldn't just repeat now on the air. I could say that freely with no problem. I could say that from any pulpit in the world with no problem. There's nothing crude about it. I could say it preaching anywhere in the world. You know, some places don't have toilets, you know, but you could say it's going to the, you know, whatever the idiom would be. So crude joking is the kind of thing that you couldn't say in this context. So again, for people to be grasping, here's what I know. You really encounter Jesus. You really spend time in the presence of God. You're not going to be doing that junk. And when I see people acting like that and wanted to glory in their, quote, liberty, I think they need to really get to know God better. We'll be right back. In fact, we're going to start with Matt in Minneapolis when we come back. Stay tuned.